Greetings, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you to another edition of the Energy Transition Dialogue, BRICS in Energy Security, Just Energy Transitions for All, organized in collaboration with the BRICS Youth Energy Agency. As the energy transition and security remain the core focus of the policymaking, the ongoing trends of climate change pose a widespread and long-standing implications across various sectors of BRICS nations. Climate change affects energy production, infrastructure, and possibly fuel supply, and it can also cause spikes in energy production and consumption. Therefore, to understand the current trends from a scientific and public policy discourse, we have with us Ms. Yomna El-Awamri, the founder and the CEO of the Carbon Impact Lab. Dr. Pamreihor Khashimwo worked as a postdoctoral scholar at the University of Delhi. Dr. Jyotsna Singh, associate professor at the University of Lucknow. Ms. Pranusha Kulkarni, Senior Program Associate at the World Resources Institute. It is great to have you all with us. Start ahead with the discussion series, especially we will start with this is a question which is got directed to Dr. Jyotsna Singh, because last time I was much more focused on the importance of small nuclear power plants and the possibility of renewable energy consumption. With the overall growth in the economy of BRICS nations, we have seen the application of small nuclear power plants remains one of the critical sectors, especially when we consider about the future of energy security. So, in such a context, what are the essential policy options for the scientific community to minimize risks and to increase the reliability of power sources from nuclear energy?
I would like to say that this is the key factor if we are going to move for a smaller nuclear power plants, because energy is the demand of the future, and for that we have to move for that, and the measures that we can take, because first is the literacy amongst the common people. That nuclear power plants, if they are going to be installed with safety, that are not going to do harm to them. So this is the first thing, but how we are going to promote the safety, that is the second question, which is going to be attended by the scientist. So the first thing is that we can go for enhanced safety design. So then the question comes, how we can go for enhanced safety design. So we can go for material selections, the material which are really sturdy at high temperatures. So if we are able to get these materials which are really sturdy at high temperatures, then obviously we are moving towards a design which is really reliable, a design for a nuclear reactor. Then the second thing that we can do is we can go for a thorium reactors, because the problem that we actually deal with the nuclear reactors is the nuclear waste. So if we go with the thorium reactors, then the nuclear waste that we are going to get will be in the small amount. The nuclear waste will reduce. At the same time, the type of the nuclear waste that we are going to get will be a much less dangerous nuclear waste, because its half-life will be less. So nuclear waste is a waste which will finally become which is finally going to be a neutral, because it is having certain high half-life. So if it is having a very high half-life, then the nuclear waste is really dangerous, because it is going to be a waste for several, it can be million of years, it can be a waste. So that is the thing. And then we have to think about the proper disposal of the nuclear waste. So then we have to segregate the nuclear waste into two categories. First is the high level waste, and the other one is the low and the medium level waste. So we are well versed with the low and the medium level waste. But if we go for a high level waste, then actually we have to go for a geological repositories where we can do with this nuclear waste. And finding out these space, it's a problem, because we in this particular region we have to deal with the public also, we have to deal with the safety norms also. Then we have to select a site which is going to be bereft, which is going to be aloofed. So this is these are the things which we can address when we are planning for small nuclear reactors. And yes, small nuclear reactors are a must if we talk about the energy transition phase.
So you have actually sparked a debate regarding whether we should go ahead with the thermal power plants or whether we should go ahead with the renewables. Though nuclear, you have rightly talked about the importance of nuclear energy, but it also comes with a series of risks. So my next questions will be directed to Dr. Pamreihor Khashimwo. You have focused much more on India and its energy security policy, especially from a foreign policy lens. But these questions will come exactly when we talk about the importance of coal as a dominant source of energy. And it is also limited by constraint if you see in terms of from the prism of environmental degradation to pollution to local communities in the surrounding areas getting affected. So in such a context, what policy options do you think that the BRICS nations can adopt, especially when we talk about India incorporating into their foreign policy objectives? And how do you think these nations, especially the BRICS nations, including India, can advocate for a renewable energy solution for the respective countries in the nearby future?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Aniban, for briefly providing the introductions how I'm going to, and at the same time, it's a pleasure to have my co-panelists and having a diverse view on energy security. Because of the time constraints, I will directly go to the how we're going to policy, options, key strategies, and all to address the dual challenge of called dependence and environmental degradation. BRIC nation, including India, can incorporate a range of policy options into the foreign policy objective to advocate for renewable energy solution. This option can balance domestic needs and international cooperation to transition toward cleaner energy resources, such as multilateral green financing and climate funds, strengthening BRIC energy cooperation, enhancing bilateral and multilateral partnership, scaling hydropower and geothermal potential, promotion of energy, renewable energy in regional diplomacy. By advocating all these policies, BRIC countries can position themselves as a global leaders in renewable energy, reducing the dependence on coal while boosting the diplomatic strength and attracting sustainable investment. This foreign policy objective will not only address climate change concerns, but also open up a new economic opportunity for emerging economies. Now it comes to the investors and businesses. Second questions that you have raised, facing the several challenges when promoting a renewable energy options in BRIC nations, including unreliable grid infrastructures, regulatory barriers, and high upfront costs. However, there are several strategies they can adopt to overcome these challenges. First, number one, decentralized renewable energy solution. Number two, public-private partnerships, energy storage solution. Number four, smart grid and digital infrastructures. And number five, addressing a regulatory and policy barriers. While scaling renewable energy in a BRIC nation poses challenges due to grid limitation, regulatory barriers, financial constraint, investors and businesses can adopt several strategies focusing on decentralized solution, innovative financing model, public-private solution, partnership with a combination of technological, financial, and policy-driven solution. Renewable energy can become more reliable, resilient, and widely adopted for civilian use across BRIC nations. And the third question that you raise is related to hydropower energy, right? And the question is, hydropower energy is very critical to renewable energy sources for BRIC nation. And its potential for growth is significant among the BRIC nation, especially for countries like India, Brazil, and China, which have an abundant water resources. To fully harness this potential, BRIC nation need to adopt a comprehensive approach that addresses both the infrastructure and policy challenges associated with hydropower generation, such as the key step that BRIC nation can taken up is number one, integrated regional energy grid. investment in modern infrastructures, environmental and social safeguards, strengthening policy and regulatory framework, regional and international cooperation. To conclude, by adopting these strategies, BRIC nation can fully leverage their hydropower potentials, ensuring a sustainable and reliable futures, meeting the growing electricity demand. Thank you.
So that is one of the interesting pointers that you have talked about, especially you stressed a bit about hydropower sources and other energy sources that one should focus on. But especially it is now important to focus on the importance of businesses, especially businesses are one of the most important. And this question is obviously directed to Ms. Yomna. Businesses in the energy sector, you are well aware that it is one of the most important when we want to talk about innovations, when we want to talk about collaboration. So in such a context, if you can give our audience a bit of an outlook, like what are the essential strategies that businesses and entrepreneurs can adopt if we talk about it from the prism of innovation and institutional cooperation?
Okay. First, I'd like to thank you for the invite, and I want to echo what was said previously regarding policy change when it comes to businesses from the business perspective. Businesses or entrepreneurs or the private sector has a big role to play here, especially because the private sector is the main instigator, let's say, of the climate crisis that we're facing now. So it kind of starts and ends with it. So in that case, businesses also provide a lot of solutions, and they find basically what we do is to find the gaps in the market and try to find a solution for it or innovate a different way or product or service in order to fill that gap. And in the energy sector, you find that entrepreneurs have a big role to play here, whether big organizations or small startups and SMEs. And each one plays their own role to fill in the gap in the energy sector. So you find big corporations such as Siemens having public-private partnerships with the government in order to implement huge projects such as in Egypt. Here we have the Binban solar park, which is a huge park using solar energy PV panels in order to provide huge sources of energy for Egypt and the region in Africa. And at the same time, it provides jobs, it fills in gaps that we have in the communities for the Egyptian locals and all of that. And this wouldn't have been able to happen without the innovation that the private sector provides and the power and all of the resources. But at the same time, the partnership with the government in order to facilitate the regulations and all of that and align it with the plan and the resources that each country has. On the other hand, off-grid solutions by small entrepreneurs provide or fill in the gaps that the infrastructure gaps that the countries can't or the governments can't provide. So you'll find a lot of solutions in rural areas and remote areas that provide energy sources, very simple, cost-effective solutions. And without entrepreneurs, you won't be able to have that. And this is a kind of innovation in itself. However, innovation is not really going to happen without all of the policy change that we need, because a big challenge that we face as startups in the energy sector specifically and in climate tech, you'll find that lack of funding, lack of regulation that is facilitating the innovation, lack of market access by small or SMEs, enterprises versus big corporations. And the thing is, it kind of the bottom up approach works in this case when it comes to innovation, but it needs to come from top as well. So yes, innovation starts with a simple idea from an entrepreneur. However, we need regulations that would facilitate this. We need markets that would allow easy access to the entrepreneurs in order to offer the solutions. And we need partnerships with research institutions in order to harness this innovation and provide entrepreneurs with the resources and the labs and the funding needed in order to scale up the solutions. And one perfect example is to scale up these solutions from the small solutions that entrepreneurs provide to bigger ones that could be adopted by governments or could be adopted as a national policy, is the work that JPAL or Abdulatif Jamil Poverty Action Lab works, which is basically you try to measure the impact of these solutions, not just when it comes to the business model itself, but also from the social perspective, whether the communities are going to benefit from that or not. And based on that, you can scale it up across different governorates or provinces or the whole country or other countries as well. And based on evidence, not just this is an idea that worked in one context that might not work in another context. This is basically the work that they do. But yeah, back to funding, back to partnerships with other actors, not just the government, but research institutes, academic institutes. I believe one perfect example was in Brazil. It was, I think, in the 70s when they worked on using or changing the use of fossil fuels versus using bioethanol production from sugarcane production. So it started from sugarcane providers, and then it was scaled up to be a national program. And in that case, they partnered with the business sector, they partnered with the government, they partnered with academic institutes. They created a hub in order to be able to achieve the model. And it's one of the models that changed the game in the country and became a successful case study in different, for us in different regions. So similar exercises or ideas where you take the solution from the entrepreneurs and support them in order to grow and scale it up across the whole country is something that we need to invest in. So I echo everything that was mentioned before about policy change. Yeah, and hope that for us startups, after the few hits that we've taken in the last few years, COVID, and other funding challenges, will be able to bounce back and have a lot more investment, not just in business models, but in knowledge transfer between the BRICS countries, making sure that we can benefit from for example, the resources that we have in Africa when it comes to people. So we have a lot of populations, young populations, that can provide us with the innovation that we need and the ideas, but they need to be mentored, they need to be invested in order to be guided to reach the level of scalability that we want, and to have the resources needed in order to scale up these solutions, and have the regulations from the government to facilitate this kind of scale up, and so on and so forth.
So it's better that you that was a very interesting podcast, to be honest enough, because I learned a lot, especially when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about businesses in the energy sector. But right now we will talk about a bit more about electronic vehicles and how especially we can use the local grid systems, especially in the global South nations, and India being one of the member of the global South as well as BRICS. We can see the growing demand in developing nations, especially when we talk about local power grids in the global South nations. And there is an increasing fear with overstrained power resources with adoptions of EVs. So this particular question will be directed to Ms. Pranusha Kulkarni. So in such a context, like, how do you think, what are the necessary steps that the government as well as the private sector can take to increase buyer and the user confidence in terms of EV adoptions in rural and as well as the urban areas of the global South nations?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me at this event. I agree with the panelists when they mention that there is a need for concerted action from businesses, the government, and the private sector, including the investors, to solve the climate crisis. So talking specifically about EV transition in the global South, just to put it in context, global South has 56% of the world's population, but has the capacity to produce only around 18% of the world's power. So on the face of it, it is evident that there is a lack of infrastructure, even when we're talking about centralized national grids, right? There is a lack of infrastructural capacity per se. So I think the first and the foremost thing, this has been pointed out even by many IEA reports, is to expand our grid capacity, expand the infrastructure. Secondly, I totally agree with the panelists when they said that there is a need for distributed RE, especially when we are talking about access to charging infrastructure for EVs. There is a lot of range anxiety among EV buyers in India, because of which it has not picked up at the pace at which policy analysts would want EV penetration to happen. It's because there is no access. With the ease with which we find petrol bunks in India, for example, EV charging stations are not. They are in pathetic state wherever they are. Also, even in the national capital of Delhi, sometimes they're not working, or there are no standardized chargers. So there are a lot of issues even between the companies. Bangalore has tried to, it has recently set up publicly owned charging stations, but it is yet to be seen how successful is it in terms of operations and maintenance. So I think the first policy option that we can have for the public sector, sorry, is to come up with net meter decentralized RE infrastructure, especially with the existing rooftop solar scheme that we have. Think about how a rooftop solar the panel owner can collaborate with maybe a CAS business, charging as a service business. So it can be a wonderful idea, because imagine there will be so many charging stations, right? So this will automatically reduce range anxiety. So I think the government has to incentivize CAS business models, uh, so that a lot of EV startups can bring in India, because we have so many engineers, right? I think we have the largest number of engineers in the world. Uh, the third thing which the government has to cash in on, recently it was in news, the digital public infrastructure is being used to come up with what's been called as unified energy interface. So basically, by using the existing UPI apps like Paytm or Bheem or PhonePe, etc., the EV owners can find the nearest EV charging station across car models, and the payment is also unified by linking it with Aadhaar and UPI interface, basically. So this can be a great technological innovation which can help foster an inclusive EV, transition in India. It can also increase EV demand. And when we are talking about EVs and EV penetration in rural areas, obviously there is not much uptake of EVs in rural India for obvious reasons. There is no confidence among customers because of lack of charging infrastructure. But I think we should focus on establishing an inclusive EV market as a whole, not just for consumers, but also for startups, or even say people, say for example, people should be trained in setting up EV stations. That is a very great source of employment, not just for engineers, but also people who are skilled in vocational training, like the semi-skilled workers who get educated in ITI institutes, for example, industrial training institutes. That can be a great avenue for generating rural employment and creating an inclusive EV transition. Lastly, I think blended finance should be pursued very, aggressively by the government, because there is no investor trust to invest in EVs, because the technology is so fast changing. People do not know whether they'll obviously incur profit or losses. So I think the government, along with the other schemes that it has, like FAME, etc., it has to come up with, say, policy innovations like giving guarantees on whatever loans are given, or investments made in the EV sector, to increase investor confidence. So yeah, these were my thoughts.
That was one of the interesting thoughts that I've heard, especially when we talk about electronic vehicles and its importance and broader adoptions, especially in the BRICS nations, because these nations are often considered as one of the members of the global South, and most of the BRICS nations are a part of it. So I will move again to the importance of nuclear energy, because this is one of the topics that are heavily cited these days, especially not only because of its dangers associated with it, but the general fascinations among the public about nuclear energy. And this has also helped to shape the international relations and foreign policy for a long period of time, for decades right now. So when we talk about the nuclear energy, the core component often results in minimal generation of waste, especially when we talk about carbon neutral energy. The opportunities often lies in terms of recycling nuclear waste or fuel for years. But in such a case, we also have to pinpoint about the dangers associated with it. But in such a case, what do you think about developing advanced reactor technologies among the BRICS nations, especially when we talk about creating expensive storage generation systems, because these systems usually require huge amounts of electricity and power. So I would like to hear your thoughts. Over to you, Dr. Jyotsna.
Thank you. Initially, I will start with a word that nuclear energy is not a thing to be think a lot, because it's not that it's not harmful. It is not whenever there is a nuclear energy generation, there is no greenhouse emission. So if we go through the chart, through the solar and through the biogas, we can see that the green gas house emissions are the least in the nuclear energy. The only thing that we should worry about is the waste. So that is what I am going to talk about right now. So if we talk about the nuclear waste, the first thing that we must think about is to invest in the reprocessing facilities. So reprocessing facilities means the spent fuel that is already spent in the nuclear reactors, we actually process that fuel. So while processing that fuel, we can take out the uranium and plutonium from that, and then we can reuse. But while processing these fuels, actually, there is a possibility of the leakage. So when there is a possibility of the leakage, then actually that particular radioactive substance gets into the atmosphere. So we must actually look to invest into reprocessing facilities. That is the first point that I want to emphasize. Then we must go for fast breeder reactors, because when we go with the fast breeder reactors, then we get more fissile fuel. That means the more neutrons are there. The coolant is going to absorb less number of neutrons, so we get more fuel in order to get more energy, more efficiency. So we must go like that. And then the third thing that I will say, that we must go for certain policies that must be uniform all around the world for the safety and the disposal of the nuclear waste. So these are the few things that I want to mention regarding the fuel or the waste part. And I think that are the points we must concentrate on.
Yeah, fuel is one of the most important, especially when we talk about the entire discourse around renewable energy and energy security. So I will come back to Dr. Pamreihor. Like when we talk about the renewable energy is one of the major problems in terms of attracting investments, and it requires scaling and it also implements questions about its reliability and resilience. So in that sense, considering the challenges of adopting renewable energy on a local basis, so what are the strategies that do you think the investors and businesses can adopt, especially when we talk about the civilian use of such energies in the BRICS nations, given the constraints that are actually posed by the grid-based energy systems, energy distribution systems across the BRICS nations and especially the global south?
Thank you. That's a very beautiful question. So anyway, the investment challenges and strategy for scaling a renewable energy, it has, if you go around with, Sundays and consumptions, coal continues to dominate the energy portfolio of BRIC nations. For example, India relies on coal for around 70% of its electricity generation. And China consumptions for coal accounts for over 55% of global demand. However, the coal contributions to environment degradation, including the emission of 44% of the world CO2, is becoming increasingly, unsustainable. In response to that, BRIC nation needs to incorporate renewable energy into foreign policy objective. Investment challenge, despite its potentials, renewable energy suffers from underinvestment. One of our panelists has already highlighted, particularly in the BRIC nation. For instance, only $125 billion was invested in new renewable energies across BRIC in 2022, which is far less compared to the developed nations like Europe or the US. To scale the renewable energy, BRIC nation must address challenges related to grid stability. The lack of the reliable grid infrastructures hampers renewable, energy adoption. Only 55% of the Indian population has consistently access to that grid. Solutions include microgrid, decentralized energy systems that offer flexible, resilient energy delivery. And more importantly, over here is what one of our panelists has already highlighted, that private investment. Incentivizing the private sector is one of the critical issues where Greek nations should focus. Government can provide in that, context. Government can provide financial incentives such as tax credits or feed-in tariff to attract a private investment in solar, wind, and hydropower. South Africa, for example, successfully introduced renewable energy independent power producer procurement program to attract billions of investment. So to maximize the hydropower generation, a strategy that BRIC nations should adopt is infrastructure development is one of the critical. Building and upgrading dams, turbines, water management system is crucial. India has introduced the hydropower policy to facilitate such development. Public-private partnership is one of the critical, area that we the BRIC nations should focus. Government should encourage PPP to share the capital intensive nature of hydropower project. For example, Rus Hydro has leveraged partnership to expand hydroelectricity. So environmental issue is one of the concerns when it comes to the hydropowers. So BRIC nations should ensure, hydropower project must meet environmental standard to prevent biodiversity loss, displacement of local communities, learning from China experience with the, three-quarter time project, for instance, and BRIC nations must still today are facing a huge challenges transitioning from coal to renewable energy. Targeted investment, policy realignment, infrastructure development, especially in the hydropower, can pave the way for sustainable energy futures. The time is to act now, as delays will only exacerbate the environmental and economic risks associated with the coal-dependent economy in the 21st century.
So that is one of the interesting points but when we consider about renewable energy, the talks mainly come with the absence of gas and oil reserves in many countries, especially in the global South nations. BRICS is one of the economic blocks, and you can someone can also call it as a powerhouse as well, where we can see uneven distributions of energy, and especially when we consider it from an oil and gas perspective. Given the uneven distribution of such energy, we can see often they tend to overuse coal to meet their current energy needs. So in such a context, what opportunities do you think exist for the youth and civil society to tackle net zero emission goals and adopt sustainable business practices within the BRICS nations? This particular question is directed to Ms. Yomna, given your expertise on this front.
Okay. So yeah, I agree. While coal is our countries are moving towards coal because of lack of resources. However, lack of resources in the global south separately for each country could be considered. Yes, we have a lack of resources. However, when we look at renewable energy sources, we don't lack resources. We actually have a lot of resources. However, we have other problems that prevent us from tapping into these resources. So for Africa, for example, we have a lot of resources when it comes to renewable energy sources such as solar, wind, geothermal energy, hydropower. We have a lot of potential to invest in these resources and be able to replace coal. And like you said, youth can help a lot in that, especially in jumping first and then trying to prove that this is an actually viable business model. And then investors in that case will let's say, see the light. However, some of these resources face other challenges. I mean, we're still grappling with issues such as colonialism and the long history of colonialism in the countries, or still we're facing a modern colonialism when it comes to corporations, big Western corporations just abusing the resources in the countries and of the global South. So a big part of it is to work on these solutions and at the same time, let's say, change our regulations in order to be able to move into renewable energy sources, and not just renewable energy sources. It can provide other solutions when it comes to net zero transition, such as circular economy business models, working on waste, like we were discussing previously, and how we can sort out or solve the problems that we have when it comes to energy. And the byproducts of energy, and how communities can benefit versus be exploited, like what happens usually. Solutions in this case would be youth jump in first when it comes to tech. So AI and blockchain have a lot, and Internet of Things have a lot of potential in order to fill some of these gaps. Blockchain technology can regulate the market, so it can provide a lot of access and trust when it comes to payment options, such as whether in electric vehicles or in other energy solutions. And this in turn will provide more trust from the investors in order to invest in these solutions. Business, not just when it comes to technical solutions, but also when it comes to business models that will facilitate this. So business models such as energy as or pay as you go for energy solutions, decentralizing energy, business model that will help in that, and government support that will help in decentralizing energy, because a lot of these countries in the global South are still suffering from bureaucracy and inconsistent policies when it comes to renewable energies. And in that case, you'll find that we start feed-in tariff and then it doesn't work because of bureaucracy, and then we move into net metering and then it doesn't work because the infrastructure is not there and people are not trained in order to facilitate this. And then governments change their policy from time to time. So all of these problems or inconsistent policies prevent these business models from moving forward and facilitating the gaps that we have. We also have a lot of gaps in the value chain that businesses can help in, and community solutions or young people can help in. So for example, energy doesn't only provide electricity, but it can help in agriculture and food security and desalination of water in water-scarce countries. So in that case, the agri-food value chain is very disjointed in a lot of countries. So businesses can provide solutions such as an Uber for moving agriculture or the harvest of agriculture. It can provide a market for small farmers in order to be able to sell and compete with major exporters. Simple solutions like this or business models can provide or fill in these gaps that we have, and it will collectively save a lot of energy. It will collectively help a lot. However, it has to be backed by government regulations. It has to be backed by financing, innovative financing solutions. So carbon credits and carbon markets and green bonds, I think it has potential to provide incentives for business. However, it also comes from governments, or it comes from the collective input from all actors, whether state or non-state actors. I was having a very interesting discussion with an investor and I asked him this question: how can we facilitate investment into climate solutions? It's very tough. And he answered a very non-standard answer where he said, we just have to jump. The startup scene, for example, in Egypt started by a bunch of people jumping first. They were excited and they wanted to do something. And I believe we need a similar push, because energy and climate startups are kind of suffering from the problems of other startups and other sectors, while these sectors are close to the mature kind of stage in their life cycle. However, let's say, patience from investors in order to be able to move forward and drive forward our innovation. And this is where the government comes in to facilitate this kind of investment solution. So a lot of more incentives, a lot more scholarships, grants, and facilities or financial instruments that will help the investment to move forward. And I think BRICS have a very unique opportunity here, because if we do it from one country to the other and exchange, whether it's knowledge or innovations or business models or trade access or cross-border collaboration, removing taxes between these countries, allowing startups to exchange their business models and be able to benefit from other cases, or for example, China has a huge manufacturing experience, how we can exchange the knowledge and the experience here to other countries that don't have that infrastructure but have other resources. So just collectively working together in order to fill in these gaps will help a lot, with the support of regulations and the support of investment channels going into supporting these solutions that will fill in the previously.
So we will thank you for the elaborate answer. It actually answers a lot of my questions, especially when you bridge between energy security and investments and businesses surrounding it. But the growing discourse and the growing research in this area further makes the field much more cluttered, and also the possibilities are very high on this field. So my another questions will be directed to Ms. Pranusha. The shift in using EVs across the country, especially in the BRICS nations, requires policy mechanisms for sustainable power generations. In what ways do you think integrating solar energy and sources will allow for the overall decentralizations of this particular EV sector especially in the BRICS nations and the countries based in the global south?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. We have all. I mean, it's a given that we need a shift to RE, but the way RE transition is happening is via mega solar parks, right? For example, ultra mega solar parks. So this is reproducing the centralized system of energy production that we already have in the form of coal mines, for example. The producer is someone else, the consumer is far away, and not everyone has access to the electricity, renewable energy which is getting produced. So I think we should keep distributed RE as our foundation. One example, policy example can be the rooftop solar scheme in India. From this, I think all the BRICS nations should have EV specific microgrids or off grids depending on the geography which we're talking about. For example, if they are hilly or remote regions in any of these countries which are inaccessible, there is a lot of scope for electric two-wheelers and electric three-wheelers. So EVs are not just about four-wheelers or cars, right? So there is a lot of scope for electric two-wheelers and three-wheelers in such remote locations, especially if it's combined with off-grid solutions, RE solutions. So I think this can be a very powerful way of sustainable power generation and increasing EV demand. Another avenue that I see for linking RE with EV is with freight electrification. There is a lot of conversation on freight electrification happening, but obviously the amount of energy needed for trucks, for example, electric trucks is huge. It's not easy to have so many high charging stations everywhere. But if we focus on freight electrification in some nodes, for example, agricultural activities need freights or trucks to carry all the agri produce, right? So in such geographical locations which are known for cultivation of wheat, rice, or whatever crop is majorly produced in the BRICS nations, if we have freight electrification there through incentives for both the producers of EVs, that is EV manufacturers, OEMs, and also the probable consumers in the form of farmers or the retailers or the wholesalers, I think it will help us create a conducive EV transition atmosphere, which is very much linked to the RE infrastructure. So I think both of the transitions, RE and EV, should go hand in hand.
So that is one of the most interesting, especially when we consider about integrating EVs with the solar power sources and the resulting into much more efficient energy generations and reaching zero emission targets. But we will right now move into the Q&A sessions and the 2-minute rapid fire round. A question is coming from Akshat Kulshrestha. He's asking, like, given the diversity in terms of economic development, energy infrastructure, how can the countries in the BRICS nations can justify a strategy for energy transitions and make unique challenges to the developmental stages that these respective countries are in? This particular question is directed to Ms. Yomna.
Okay, very interesting question. So collaboration is key here, and however, this is very tough because BRICS is, or the BRICS bloc is different from other, let's say, blocks because it doesn't have, for example, the same regulatory framework as other blocks there. So it has the collaboration has to be spelled out, not just when it comes to policy, but or memorandum of understanding, but it has to be translated into financial instruments. It has to be verified when it comes where the funding, for example, if you create a funding mechanism between different countries, will go. I think we can build on the strength of each country. So you'll find, and what's interesting now about BRICS Plus is that we have new blocks inside BRICS. So it's not just the initial countries. We have a new bloc, African bloc, because South Africa now has Egypt and Ethiopia. We have a Middle Eastern bloc where we have very strong economies joining us, the UAE, Saudi Arabia. So in that case, each one comes with their own strength, but at the same time, on let's say weakness or areas for development. China obviously have a very strong manufacturing capacity. However, entrepreneurs, for example, are not, or entrepreneurship is not really strong there. So you'll be able to benefit from each resource through collaboration. So if we can use or exchange the resources and the strength of India and African countries where we have population, we have a lot of youth, we have a lot of let's say spaces of invest, and we can exchange the results. Or if we have energy sources, a lot of potential resources for energy in Africa, for example, but we lack the investment. And
So
kinds of collaborations from countries that don't lack capital, change they can. Sorry.
So that was one of the most important points that you have raised, especially when we considered about managing energy sources and the tensions across various BRICS nations, especially when we considered about a joint strategy. So I will direct but then another question to question from Deepika. This is directed to Ms. Pranusha Kulkarni. What are the innovative strategies and governance models that the BRICS nations can adopt, especially when we considered about EV transitions and adoption of it in the subnational nations, the regions of the global south?
Okay, so this is relevant to the previous question that was asked. I agree that even it's not, the differences are not just there between the nations. In vast countries like Russia or India or all the BRICS countries, right, there are important subnational differences culturally, economically, socially. So I don't think there is one possible strategy which is equally applicable to all. Yes, we can have framework or what are known as guiding frameworks, which can lay out the broad principles on which the EV transition can be mapped out. For example, at the global level, we have the United Nations Charter. It is equally applicable to all the nations. Or say, for example, the Paris Agreement. It is applicable to all the signatory nations, but all nations can have their own nationally determined contributions. Right. So I think similar such subnational strategies and also national strategies have to be developed by all the states or provinces of BRICS nations, and also obviously by the nations, depending on the unique financial, social, and cultural circumstances. For example, when taking examples from India, Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu are leaders in subnational EV transition in India. But say the northeastern states like UP, Bihar, or the entire northeast region is lagging behind in EV transition, right? So the government has to focus on such remote or underdeveloped regions so that there is inclusive EV transition and all segments of population can benefit from this sustainable technology.
Especially when we talk about sustainable energy and sustainable and energy resilience, India is one of the most important point. So we need to consider it also from a prism of the foreign policy as well, because we need to consider the current international relations and the tensions, especially in the global energy market. So this particular question is directed to Dr. Pamreihor Khashimwo. This is from Anmol. How exactly do you think the foreign policy of BRICS nations is important, especially when we try to secure energy sources from the tensions in the global energy market in the contemporary period?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. See, BRIC is not only one nation, it has come together, number of nations which have a particular or varieties of agenda to come together. So multilateral cooperation, partnership based on the common agenda is very important for BRIC nations to move forward for renewable energy, scaling up of renewable energy. BRIC nations should advocate for an increased access to multilateral climate financing. It is very important because all the BRIC nations are having a underinvestment in renewable RE sectors. So such as Green Finance Fund and BRIC-led initiative Climate Fund, and BRIC nations should have a negotiated term for climate financing, including technology transfer, concessional loans, and renewable energy infrastructures. These are very important in order to scale up our renewable energies transformation. Policy options developed should be based on promoting diplomacy. So integrate renewable energy solution into a regional, so it can become a regional cooperation framework, such as South-South cooperation. Take the example, classic example, South-South cooperation and Belt and Road Initiative, particularly in Africa and Latin America. See, this position BRIC countries as a leader in promoting sustainable development globally. This can be a platform they have to find that avenue to emphasize renewable energy as a part of BRIC diplomatic engagement. It should be the key, one of the key, diplomatic engagement among the BRIC nations. Offering technical expert financial support to partner countries for renewable project. This can boost diplomatic relations at the same time and global standing on a climate leadership.
Thank you. We will now move to another questions, which is directed to Dr. Jyotsna Singh. Especially when you consider about scientific research in renewable energy, how do you think that the research in this sector can be integrated into policy making and to address the country's recent and country's immediate energy needs?
Can you repeat the question once again? Let me get a feel of what actually is asked.
So how can research in renewable energy be better integrated into the policy making process to address the country's immediate energy security needs?
So yes, all of us have talked about the availability of the renewable energy sources, and the technology is also there. The technology improvement is one sector, but when we are talking about the policies, the policy sector should be framed in such a way that the investors, the MSME, they are encouraged to adopt, go for new innovations. They must come up with with large, I will say, buffer to these sectors so that they can take a challenge. If they are going for a new technology, suppose some new technology is there, and I want some sector to come into and go for the marketing of that sector, then there should be some buffer given to that particular technology, that particular business, that particular MSME in the policies. And largely, I will say that the policy should be driven by the people who are going for the business in this sector. So that, and business in this sector, and actually the business should be in such a way that it is propagated to all the rural and the urban people, to all.
Now we will come with the final question of this particular interesting sessions that we have come across. We have discussed a lot about energy security. We have discussed about foreign policy. We have talked about businesses as well, and of course to the global south and the BRICS nations that we are all part of. But this particular question is all about like what exactly with regard to storage and absence of energy transmission grids. How can we overcome this energy security for all? This particular question will be directed to Ms. Pranusha. How exactly do you envision to overcome this problem, especially when you consider the EV sector?
Okay, so I think establishing microgrids, mini grids, and off grids is an excellent way to go. Kerala has experimented with this kind of subnational or decentralized RE production with a lot of success. It's not just solar energy. For example, even hydro energy can be produced at a smaller scale, and that would have very less impact on sensitive ecozones like Himalayas, for example, in India. So I think the government should stop, encouraging mega RE infrastructures, be they hydel, wind, or solar, because they are not sustainable. They reproduce the fossil-based, the coal-based exploitative architecture in every way, technological and social architectures. So yes, small scale is the way to go.
So thanks for your insights. And now we will end this particular sessions. Today we have discussed about just energy transition, because energy equity, energy resilience is one of the core focus, especially when we talk about renewable energy. And thanks a lot for being a part of this discussion series. And to our audience, keep watching Geo Interview and subscribe to the BRICS YK channel. Thank you, everyone.